"Get out, you old witch." Those were the last words I heard clearly before the world tilted on its axis. They weren't shouted in a moment of fleeting anger. They were delivered with a cold, calculated venom that curdled the air in my own living room. My home, the one David and I had poured our souls into, brick by brick, memory by memory. This was the house where I'd rocked my son Michael to sleep, where the walls had absorbed decades of laughter from birthday parties and holiday gatherings. Now, those same walls were echoing with a cruelty I couldn't comprehend. The hands that pushed me weren't a stranger's. They belonged to my son. The face twisted in a mask of disgust wasn't an enemy's. It was my daughter-in-law, Sarah. I stumbled backward, my 72-year-old legs struggling to find their footing on the Persian rug David had proudly carried through the door 30 years ago. My hip exploded in a starburst of pain as I hit the floor. The impact knocked the wind out of my lungs, leaving me gasping like a fish on dry land. But the physical pain was a dull throb compared to the sharp, shattering agony in my chest. I was humiliated, dragged, and left on the floor as if my very existence was a piece of trash to be discarded. My life, my love, my legacy, all reduced to an inconvenience in the eyes of my own family. But what they didn't know, in their fit of righteous fury, was that my hand had found my phone in my cardigan pocket. My thumb, trembling but determined, had pressed the emergency call button. The line was open. The 911 dispatcher on the other end was a silent witness to every shove, every insult, every ragged breath I took. And when that audio file was later played in a courtroom, and then on every news channel from coast to coast, the entire country heard the truth they tried to bury. This is the story of how a woman they threw away found her voice in the darkness. It's not just about violence. It's about the fierce, unyielding fight for dignity when everyone has counted you out. They took almost everything from me that night, but they couldn't take my courage to ask for help. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. If you believe in standing up for what's right, consider subscribing to the channel. It didn't start with a shove. Evil rarely announces itself so brazenly. It creeps in disguised as concern, camouflaged as practicality. For years after David passed, Michael and Sarah were attentive. They'd bring over groceries, help with the yard work, and call to check in. Michael, my only son, had his father's eyes, but none of his quiet strength. He was malleable, easily swayed by the stronger personality of his wife, Sarah. Sarah was a woman carved from ice. She was polished, articulate, and always seemed to be performing for an invisible audience. Her compliments felt like assessments, her hugs like a measuring of my fragility. "Oh, Martha, this big old house must be so much for you to handle," she'd say, her eyes scanning the high ceilings and the mahogany furniture David had so lovingly restored. "You should be relaxing, not worrying about dusting all these things." The things she spoke of were my life. The porcelain shepherdess David bought me at a flea market on our second anniversary, the heavy oak dining table where we'd hosted every Thanksgiving for 3 decades, the faded photographs on the mantelpiece of a smiling, vibrant family that no longer existed. To Sarah, they were clutter. To me, they were anchors. The first real crack appeared about a year ago. Michael and Sarah were launching a new business venture, some kind of artisanal coffee boutique. It sounded trendy and expensive. They sat me down at that same oak dining table, their faces arranged in masks of earnest enthusiasm. "Mom," Michael started, his gaze shifting nervously between me and his wife. "We have an incredible opportunity, but we're a little short on capital." Sarah jumped in, her voice smooth as silk. "What we're proposing is a win-win, Martha. We were thinking, if you were to take out a small home equity loan, just a little one, it would give us the boost we need. We'd pay it back in a year, with interest of course. Think of it as an investment in your family's future, in your granddaughter Jessica's future." Jessica, my granddaughter. They always knew how to use her. She was a quiet, sensitive girl of 16, often caught in the crossfire of her parents' ambitions. I looked at Michael, my son, who couldn't even meet my eye. I saw the ghost of the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, now asking me to put the roof over my head on the line for a get-rich-quick scheme. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "David and I paid this house off. It's my security. I can't risk it." Sarah's smile didn't falter, but a glacier moved behind her eyes. "Of course, Martha, we understand completely. It's just, we thought you'd want to help." The unspoken words hung in the air. "What good are you if you won't help?" From that day on, the chill deepened. Their visits became less frequent, their calls shorter. When they did come, it was with an air of martyrdom. They'd point out a cobweb in the corner, or a weed in the garden with a sigh, as if my inability to maintain the house to their standards was a personal affront. They started talking at me, not to me. Conversations would happen around me, about me, as if I were a piece of furniture that had outlived its usefulness. "Dad's going to have to fix that leaky faucet again," Sarah would say to Michael, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. "This house is just falling apart. An old person can't keep up." They suggested I sell the house and move into a lovely little condo they'd found. It was of course conveniently located an hour away, far from my friends, my church, and the life I knew. When I refused, they suggested I move in with them. The offer sounded generous, but the look in Sarah's eyes told a different story. It wasn't an invitation, it was a strategy. If I lived under their roof, they could control me, control my finances, and most importantly get their hands on my house to sell. The final straw wasn't a single event, but a slow, dawning horror. I started noticing small discrepancies in my bank statements. A $50 charge here for a store I never visited, $100 there for an online subscription I didn't recognize. When I questioned Michael about it, he became flustered. "Oh, that must have been Sarah," he mumbled. "She helps manage your online bills sometimes. Probably a mistake. I'll look into it." He never did. And I knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut, that it wasn't a mistake. They were siphoning money from me. My own son, the boy I taught to be honest and kind, was stealing from his mother. The foundation of my world, which had already been fractured by David's death, began to crumble. I felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. The people who were supposed to be my protectors had become predators. I started locking my bedroom door at night, a habit I hadn't had since I was a little girl afraid of monsters under the bed. The irony was not lost on me. The monsters weren't under the bed anymore. They had a key to the front door. The night of the assault began with a lie. Michael called me, his voice strained with false cheerfulness. "Hey, Mom. Sarah and I are going to pop over tonight. We want to discuss some exciting plans for your birthday next month." My birthday, the day I brought him into this world. The thought felt like a cruel joke. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I knew this wasn't about a birthday party. It was a confrontation, the culmination of a year of mounting tension. I almost said no, that I was tired, that another time would be better. But a part of me, the part that still clung to the hope of the mother I used to be, wanted to believe I was wrong. Maybe they just wanted to talk. Maybe we could fix this. So I said, "Of course, dear, I'll put the kettle on." As I waited, I walked through the quiet house, my hand trailing along the back of David's favorite armchair. The silence felt heavy, charged. I went into my office, a small room lined with books and old tax documents. On a hunch, I pulled up my online banking portal. My heart hammered against my ribs. There it was, a transaction from 2 days prior, a wire transfer of $5,000. The recipient was a holding company I'd never heard of. I did a quick search online. The company was registered to Sarah's maiden name. The blood drained from my face. It wasn't just petty cash anymore. This was a calculated, significant theft. They were gutting my life savings. The kettle whistled from the kitchen, a shrill, piercing scream that mirrored the one trapped in my own throat. Just then, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and they swept in, bringing a gust of cold night air with them. Sarah was wearing a sharp blazer and a predatory smile. Michael shuffled behind her, avoiding my eyes. Martha, you look tired, Sarah chirped, kissing the air beside my cheek. See, Michael, I told you this big house was wearing her out. We brought you some tea, Michael offered, holding up a box of some exotic herbal blend I'd never drink. A peace offering, a distraction. I didn't want tea, I wanted the truth. We sat in the living room, the space between us feeling like a canyon. I decided to dispense with the pleasantries. $5,000, Michael, I said, my voice shaking slightly. There was a wire transfer from my savings account 2 days ago. Michael's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sarah, however, didn't flinch. She simply crossed her legs, the picture of composure. Oh, that, she said dismissively. We were going to tell you, it was an investment. We found a stock that's about to take off. We were doing you a favor, Martha. Growing your money, doing me a favor. The audacity of it stole my breath. You stole from me, Sarah. You both did. Now, Mom, don't be dramatic. Michael finally managed to say, his voice pleading. It's not stealing when it's family. We were going to pay it back. You have been stealing from me for months. My voice cracked, the accusation finally breaking free. Little amounts here and there, hoping I wouldn't notice, hoping I was too old, too stupid, too senile to see what was happening right under my nose. Sarah's mask finally dropped, her face hardened, her eyes narrowing into slits. Senile is right, she hissed. You don't even know what you're talking about. You're confused. We've been taking care of you, and this is the thanks we get. We've been pouring our time and energy into this money pit of a house, and all you do is complain. This is it, I thought. The point of no return. As she spoke, a cold, clear-eyed terror washed over me. This wasn't an argument anymore. The look in her eyes was something I'd never seen before. It was pure, unadulterated greed. My hand, hidden from their view, slipped into my cardigan pocket and found my phone. With my thumb, I navigated by touch alone. Swipe up. Emergency call. I pressed the icon and let the phone slide down into the soft depths of the pocket, the screen dark, the line silently open. This house is mine, I said, my voice low and trembling. David and I built it. You will not take it from me. Oh, we will, Sarah sneered, standing up, one way or another. You are going to sign the house over to us, or we are going to have you declared incompetent. We have dozens of examples of your confusion, your forgetfulness. It's our word against yours. Who do you think they'll believe? Get out, I whispered. Get out of my house. That's when she laughed, a short, ugly sound. Your house, you're just living in it. You're a guest who's overstayed her welcome. It's our inheritance, and we're tired of waiting for it. She took a step toward me, and Michael stood up with her, a reluctant soldier falling in line. Get out, you old witch, Sarah spat, her face just inches from mine, and then she shoved me. Hard. Michael reached out, not to stop her, but to grab my arm, his fingers digging into my thin skin. Just listen to her, Mom. You're making things worse. It was a chaotic blur of motion and sound. I was pushed backward, stumbling over the coffee table. The porcelain shepherdess, my treasured memory of David, wobbled and crashed to the floor, shattering into 100 pieces. The sound of it breaking was like a physical blow. A cry tore from my lips, a sound of pure anguish. They were not just attacking me, they were erasing my past, shattering my memories. I fell to the floor, my hips screaming in protest. From my pocket, my phone was a silent witness. It recorded the sound of the porcelain smashing, it recorded Sarah's venomous voice. See what you did. You're a menace, you can't even take care of yourself. It recorded Michael's weak, complicit pleas. Sarah, stop, that's enough. It recorded my own sobbing breaths, as I lay on the rug, surrounded by the shards of my life. They stood over me, two towering figures of menace in the home that was once my sanctuary. They thought they had all the power. They thought they had won. Then, after what felt like an eternity, they turned and walked out, slamming the front door behind them, leaving me in a broken, silent house. But the silence wasn't absolute. A tiny, tinny voice, almost inaudible, was speaking from my pocket. It was the 911 dispatcher. "Ma'am, are you there? I have officers en route to your location. Ma'am, can you hear me? Help is on the way. Now I'm curious about you, who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever felt completely betrayed by those you should have been able to trust? Comment below, and if this story is touching you, please leave a like to show your support." The flashing red and blue lights painted surreal, dancing patterns across my living room walls, illuminating the dust motes hanging in the air, and the glittering shards of porcelain on the floor. Lying there, with the calm, professional voice of the dispatcher still whispering from my pocket, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a scene from a television show. But the throbbing in my hip and the raw, cold ache in my heart were undeniably real. 2 police officers entered first, their expressions a mixture of caution and concern. One was a young man with a fresh face, the other an older, more seasoned officer named Evans. He had tired, kind eyes that seemed to take in the entire scene in a single glance. Me on the floor, the overturned table, the shattered heirloom. "Ma'am," Officer Evans said, kneeling beside me, his voice gentle. "I'm Officer Evans. Can you tell me your name?" "Martha," I whispered. "Martha Clark." Paramedics followed, and the room became a quiet hive of activity. They checked my vitals, carefully examined my hip, and spoke to me in soothing, steady tones. They were strangers, yet they treated me with more care and respect than my own son had moments before. The shame of it all was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. Here I was, a 72-year-old woman, being tended to like a fallen child in the middle of her own home because her family had attacked her. Officer Evans stayed by my side, asking quiet questions. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened? Who did this to you?" The words caught in my throat. Saying them out loud would make it irrevocably real. "My son," I finally managed to say, the words tasting like ash. "My son and his wife." He just nodded, his face unreadable. He had heard stories like this before. As the paramedics helped me onto a stretcher, my hand went to my pocket. "My phone," I said, my voice raspy. "It's still on." I called 911. Officer Evans's eyes widened slightly. He carefully retrieved the phone, looked at the active call screen, and ended the connection. "You recorded it?" he asked, a new intensity in his voice. "I think so," I said. "I don't know. I was scared. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights were harsh and unforgiving. The doctors confirmed I had a severely bruised hip and a sprained wrist, but thankfully, nothing was broken. The physical injuries would heal. I wasn't so sure about the rest of it." While I was being treated, Officer Evans listened to the 911 audio file in the hallway. I couldn't see him, but I could imagine his face as he heard Sarah's venomous words, Michael's complicity, and my own terrified cries. When he came back into my room, his expression had changed. The professional calm was gone, replaced by a cold, hard anger. He was no longer just a cop doing his job. He was a man who had just borne witness to an unspeakable betrayal. "Martha," he said, pulling up a chair. "I've listened to the call, the entire 10 minutes of it. There is no ambiguity. We have everything." He paused, his gaze steady and serious. "Your son and daughter-in-law are on their way to the precinct now. We called them and asked them to come in to give their side of the story. They have no idea this recording exists." A few hours later, Officer Evans returned. He looked weary. "Just as we expected," he said, sighing. "They waltzed in and painted a very different picture. According to them, you were the aggressor. They claimed you've been mentally unstable for months, that you had a violent outburst, started throwing things, and fell. They said they left because they were scared of you. They were calm, convincing, and expressed deep concern for your well-being." I closed my eyes, the poison of their lies seeping into the sterile hospital room. Of course, that was their story. The concerned, loving family dealing with a difficult senile old woman. It was perfect, it was believable, and without that recording, it would have been their word against mine. They are being charged with assault, larceny, and elder abuse, Officer Evans continued, his voice firm. The audio is undeniable. Their lies just dug them a deeper hole. In the days that followed, a social worker named Carol was assigned to my case. She was a warm, no-nonsense woman who helped me navigate the bewildering aftermath. She arranged for a temporary restraining order against Michael and Sarah and helped me find a lawyer. But the biggest battle was the one raging inside me. The district attorney's office was building a strong case, and the centerpiece of their evidence was the 911 call. They wanted to use it in court. They also warned me that in high-profile cases like this, evidence sometimes gets leaked to the press. The audio is explosive, Martha, my lawyer, a kind man named Mr. Davis, told me. It's the kind of thing the media would have a field day with. We can try to keep it under wraps, but there's a chance it will get out. I need you to be prepared for that. The thought made me physically ill. My most vulnerable, terrifying moments, my private agony, broadcast for the world to hear, for strangers to pick apart and judge. I wanted justice, but I didn't want to become a public spectacle, a tragic headline. Maybe I should just drop the charges, I whispered to Carol one afternoon, as we sat in my living room, the space where the assault happened still feeling tainted. They're my family, Michael is my son. Carol looked at me, her expression full of empathy. What they did to you wasn't a family dispute, Martha. It was a crime. Michael may be your son, but he stopped acting like one that night. Think about what will happen if you drop the charges. They will see it as a victory. They will know they can get away with it. What do you think they'll do next? Her words hit me with the force of a physical blow because I knew she was right. This wasn't just about me anymore. What about all the other elderly people who were being silenced, manipulated, and abused behind closed doors, who didn't have a recording to prove their truth? My fear of exposure was warring with a new, burgeoning sense of responsibility. Officer Evans had told me that elder abuse cases were notoriously difficult to prosecute precisely because they often came down to a he said, she said scenario, where the victim was easily discredited as confused or vindictive. My pain had a voice. It was raw, ugly, and humiliating. But it was also the truth. And maybe, just maybe, the truth needed to be heard, no matter how loud or how painful it was. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but my resolve solidifying like steel. Let them use it. Let the world hear what they did. It happened on a Tuesday. I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to read a book, but my eyes just kept scanning the same paragraph over and over. The house was too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like an intruder. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Carol, the social worker. Turn on the news, Martha. Channel 5, and brace yourself. With a trembling hand, I picked up the TV remote. A local news anchor was speaking with a grave expression. Behind her, a picture of my house. My house. And then my own face, a grainy photo from my driver's license, looking startled and old. We have a shocking story of elder abuse unfolding in our community tonight, the anchor said. Prosecutors have released a chilling 911 call in the case against Michael and Sarah Clark, who stand accused of assaulting and robbing Michael's 72-year-old mother, Martha Clark. We want to warn our viewers, the audio you are about to hear is deeply disturbing. And then it came. The sound filled my living room, turning it back into a crime scene. First, Sarah's voice, sharp and cold. You are going to sign the house over to us, or we are going to have you declared incompetent. Then my own, trembling and defiant, get out of my house. And the phrase that would soon be echoing across the country, a banner of their cruelty. Get out, you old witch. They played the sound of the shove, my gasp, the sickening crash of the porcelain shepherdess. They played my sob, a raw, guttural sound of a heart breaking. I sat there on my sofa, frozen as my deepest trauma was broadcast for thousands, then millions to hear. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. It was a complete and utter violation. But then, something else happened. The story didn't just stay local. Within hours, it was picked up by national news outlets. My little suburban nightmare became a national headline. #Justice for Martha started trending on social media. The audio clip was everywhere. Every time I turned on the TV or looked at my computer, I heard my own pain, but it was followed by a chorus of outrage and support from complete strangers. "This is monstrous. How could a son do this to his own mother? That poor woman. My heart breaks for her." People started leaving flowers on my porch. My mailbox was flooded with letters and cards from all over the country. They were from people who had seen their own parents or grandparents suffer in silence, from nurses who worked in elder care facilities, from people who were simply moved and horrified by my story. They didn't see me as a spectacle, they saw me as a survivor. They heard my voice. For Michael and Sarah, the public exposure was a swift and brutal reckoning. They were instantly vilified. Sarah was fired from her high-powered real estate job. The artisanal coffee shop they had stolen my money to fund was boycotted before it even opened. Their photos were everywhere, their faces synonymous with greed and cruelty. Friends abandoned them. Their daughter Jessica was reportedly staying with a relative, shielded from the public disgrace of her parents. Their perfect, curated life had been shattered by a 10-minute audio file. Their trial was a formality. Faced with the undeniable evidence of the 911 call and the crushing weight of public opinion, their lawyer advised them to take a plea deal. They pleaded guilty to felony elder abuse and grand larceny. The judge, a stern woman who looked at them with undisguised contempt, sentenced them to the maximum allowed by the plea agreement, several years in prison. I was in the courtroom that day. I watched as they were led away in handcuffs. Michael finally looked at me, his face a mask of shame and disbelief. There was no apology in his eyes, only the dawning horror of a man who had been caught. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just a vast, empty sadness for the son I had lost long before he ever laid a hand on me. The months after the sentencing were a period of quiet rebuilding. The house no longer felt tainted, it felt like mine again, reclaimed. The letters of support kept coming, and with Carol's encouragement, I started to answer them. I realized my story had become a catalyst. It had given other people the courage to speak out, to check on their elderly neighbors, to question the strained silence in their own families. Officer Evans stopped by one day, not in his uniform, but in a simple polo shirt, holding a small box. "I just wanted to see how you were doing, Martha," he said. Inside the box was a new porcelain shepherdess, almost identical to the one that had been broken. "I know it's not the same," he said quietly. "But it's a start." I placed it on the mantelpiece, right where the old one used to be. It wasn't a replacement for the past, but it was a promise for the future. I started a local support group for victims of elder abuse, which met in my living room every Thursday. We would sit around the oak dining table, sharing stories, tears, and sometimes even laughter. My home, once a place of trauma, had become a sanctuary again, not just for me, but for others. I am not the same woman I was before that night. The naive trust in my family is gone forever, and that is a grief I will carry with me always. But I am not the broken, discarded woman they left on the floor. I am Martha Clark, a survivor. My voice, which they tried so desperately to silence, became a roar that echoed across the nation. And it all started with a simple, desperate act of courage, the press of a button, a silent call for help that became the loudest truth of all. Thank you for watching until here. My journey was difficult, but your support means the world. I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Your time is precious, and I'm grateful you shared it with me.